Hello everyone! So today I want to talk to you about Arco Linux. Arco Linux is a very unique distribution. It's an Arch-based distribution with one purpose in mind, that is to help you learn Linux. It's not just a distribution, it's actually a learning path to take you from a new Linux user noob to an expert who knows every aspect of the Linux system. It has a very clear step-by-step phases of learning. By the end of these phases, you should be able to actually go install the vanilla Arch Linux, but with more confidence on what you want in your Linux distribution. If you go to arcolinux.info, you can find all the information about the project here. If you click on Home, you will find that it's actually more than one website. And these are actually the phases of the learning path. First, you have the Arco Linux, and then the Arco Linux D, and then the Arco Linux B, and then lastly the Arch Linux ISO. This is the most advanced part where you will actually create your own ISO of a Linux distribution. You first begin by actually going to arcolinux.com, and here this is the first phase, and you can go to actually see the learning path and the different phases that you will need to cover. The Arco Linux ISO is the phase 1 ISO. In this ISO you install 3 different desktops and know the difference between them. The first one is XFCE. This is like a desktop environment that is like Windows or Mac. And then you go for a little minimal setup such as OpenBox. And you can also try the i3 tiling window manager. All the 3 setups in just one ISO. So you get to try it for yourself and know the difference and know how to configure each and every single one of them. Phase 2 and 3 and 4 go with the Arco Linux D ISO. This is a more minimal ISO where you will actually choose every desktop environment that you need, and later on even choose every package that gets installed on your system. You will also get to know more about Calamares, the installer of the Arco Linux that is also used in many Arch-based Linux distributions. Then in phase 4, you will actually start to learn how to actually build your own ISO file and choosing all the packages that you want and put them already installed in your ISO file. And you can actually see a lot of people that has already done so in already pre-configured Arco Linux B ISOs. And then phase 5, this is where you go the hard way and go install Arch Linux from scratch, like from the command line. And you will learn the process now that you know the different components of an operating system, and you already have an idea of what do you want to get installed on your system. And then phase 6, you will create your own Arch Linux based system by actually creating an Arch based Linux ISO from scratch. And this is a separate project called Carly, which stands for Customized Arch Linux ISO. So now I am in the arcolinux.com, the first phase, and I go to download, and I will download the first ISO or the first phase ISO, which is the Arco Linux ISO. And then you'll need to mount the ISO file on a USB flash drive using a software such as Etcher or Rufus if you are on Windows. And now we'll go see what it looks like when you actually boot from that flash drive. So, when you first boot from the USB, you will get an actually fully functional operating system. The default desktop environment is the XFCE, which is very similar to Windows, and you can check like they have the start menu here, and you get this Arco Linux welcome app. Now when you are ready to install, you just run the Calamares, which is the installer for Arco Linux. The first thing you need to do is choose your language of the installation. So I will go with English and hit next. Now this is the kernel that you will be installing on your system. If you have an NVIDIA driver, you will probably need the NVIDIA with the Linux kernel or the NVIDIA LTS with the Linux LTS kernel, which stands for the long-term support. If you don't have any NVIDIA, you just click the Linux kernel or the Linux kernel LTS if you choose to. I will go with the NVIDIA with Linux kernel and then hit next. Now these are actually additional packages. You can choose not to install any at all, or choose exactly which one do you use and install them, such as Zoom or Slack or Discord. I will skip this for now. Now these are some IDEs and text editors. If you are a programmer or a developer, you might need to check them out, such as Visual Studio Code or KDevelop, or the IntelliJ. I normally choose the Visual Studio Code bin and then hit next. Now this is the Office suite that you would like to get installed on your desktop. Most probably you will go with the LibreOffice Fresh. If you want a more stable and older version, you have the LibreOffice Still option that you can install here, and then hit next. Now these are multimedia applications such as Spotify, Kdenlive for video editing, OBS Studio for screen recording, or Audacity for example, and then hit next. Now this is very important for your internet browser. You can choose Firefox, or they have already a Firefox version with an ad block installed on it. I normally choose the vanilla Firefox, and you can actually choose multiple options here, like I can choose Brave and Firefox to get installed at the same time, and hit next. Now the theming. This actually depends on which desktop environment you will be using. You can skip it and install it later if you wish so. These are some graphics software such as Blender, a very popular 3D software, and Krita, a very powerful and alternative to Photoshop. We have some games category software such as Lutris, which help you play games that were made on Windows on Linux, or you have some actual games like GNOME Chess for example. Also you can install Steam using the Arco Linux Meta Steam. If you don't want any of these, just click next. Now this is very important because at least you need one terminal on your system. You can start with Alacrity, but if you are installing a special desktop environment such as KDE, you will probably want console, or if you are going with GNOME, you will want the GNOME terminal. But this is the Arco Linux ISO, so it already has XFCE, OpenBox, and i3. So I'll just go with the simplest one, which is Alacrity, and hit next. Now this will ask you if you want any special file managers. Nautilus is what you get by default on Ubuntu, for example, and Dolphin is what you get when you are installing any KDE Plasma distribution. You can actually choose more than one file manager and try them for yourself and decide later which one would you like to keep, and then hit next. Now these are some utilities such as Octopi, which help you install external packages from the Arch repository. So this is an essential one, and then you can click on next. Now these are some accessories. The most important is probably the fonts, and then hit on next. This section is very specific for the Arco Linux developers. If you are not an Arco Linux developer, you will not need this part. Hit next. Now we are starting to localize our Arco Linux installation. So we choose the location and hit next, and then choose the keyboard layout, and you can test it right here, and then hit next. Now this is important because this will erase all the data on your disk. So you should have made already a backup of your important data on a separate drive. And you have more than one option for the swap partitioning. You can actually choose to have no swap at all, which is fine if you have more than 16 gigs of RAM, or have a swap but the size will differ depending on whether you would like to later hibernate your machine or not. Or the most flexible option is actually swap to a file, that this can vary in size later on, and then hit on next. Now you should be choosing your username and also choose the name of the computer. This will appear for other computers that connect on the same network, and then choose a security password. And because I will be the only one using this machine, so I wanted to log in automatically and use the same password for the sudo account or the administrator account, and then hit on next. Now this is just a summary to remind you if you need to change anything before actually beginning the install. If you are already okay with what you have already chosen, just hit on install and start the installation process. And that's it. Now the installation has finished, and all what we need to do now is just reboot our machine and remove the USB flash drive and start using Arco Linux. Now when you first boot up your Arco Linux, what you get is the XFCE desktop environment, and you get also the Arco Linux welcome app. I recommend you go with the YouTube button here to check the Arco Linux YouTube channel. It has a lot of very useful information and can guide you through all what you need to know about Arco Linux and about the different desktop environments. It's by Eric Dubois, a very useful channel. Now, if you want to go to other desktop environments, you need to actually log out go to the right top here and you will see different options, either OpenBox or i3. Let's begin by OpenBox, for example, and enter our password here. And now this is a different desktop environment. As you can see, there is no bottom menu here, and there is actually no main menu. The main menu lies in the right click. If you hit right click on your mouse, you can see all your software packages organized by categories, which is very different from the normal XFCE desktop environment that works very much like Windows. Now, to log out of OpenBox and go to another option, which is the i3 window manager, you need to right click and hit on exit OpenBox and then log out. Now we're back to the display manager here, and on the right top I'll need to choose the i3 window manager, also enter my password, and now log in. Now i3 is a tiling window manager that works very differently from any other desktop environment that you have previously worked on. And thanks to Arco Linux, they already have added a list of shortcuts on the right here to help you get started. So for example, the S here stands for super key. So if you want, for example, to open the terminal, you hit the super key or the meta key and hit enter. When you add another terminal, for example, the screen gets split and it adds the new terminal on the right. If you hit meta enter one more time, that right side is now split into two different windows. And that's how a window manager differs from a desktop environment. And that's it. I hope that was helpful. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for watching.